welcome to Singapore. And this is Singapore. It is actually 27th of July 2021. It's 9:14 p.m. Singapore time. Welcome to sunny Singapore. And Singapore is actually at the equator. We're actually like 7 degrees north of the equator. We are sunny all year round. And I think you must have heard of Singapore through these international news. Singapore is almost likened to Paris and New York. It's a cosmopolitan place. It's a place where you shop and you eat and you shop and you shop and you shop again. Have you watched the show Crazy Rich Asians?
I have. Yeah.
Do you know that it's actually shot in Singapore?
Yeah, and it's beautiful.
Yes. Thank you for being there in the show. Tell us about you, Collette, before we go into the interview formal.
Yeah, of course. So I'm in sunny San Diego, California, USA. Yeah. And I'd love to go to Singapore someday. I've heard amazing things about it. It's a very vibrant, modern city and clean and things like that. So, excuse my voice. Goodness, it's super early here. It's like 6 a.m. I'm not used to getting up this early, but I was so excited to be on a podcast with Vicky that I got up to be here. So I'm so excited to talk to you guys. And a little bit about me. I am married. I've been married for about 4 years, and I have a little dog, no kids. And I do life coaching. I specialize in dating after trauma and abuse, which we're going to talk about a little bit today. Excited to dive into that. I also teach yoga and I do energy work. I do something called Access Consciousness bars, along with a few other modalities. So really big on mind, body, spirit, holistic coaching. So yeah. Thanks for having me, Vicky.
And I'd like to formally welcome you here. You're spiritually now teleported to Singapore.
So cool.
Yeah, Collette, even before we go informal, tell us, what do you do and why are you there on Facebook doing this with me?
Yeah, of course. So the story I tell is my mom was married 4 times. 3 of them were to abusive addicts. And so I watched her get hit and beaten, and I watched her be high on drugs, and I had a gun pointed at me. I walked in to find her being strangled, just moved 6 times in 12 years, 6 different schools. And so I just had a very tumultuous childhood growing up. And it made me question, why? Why do people put themselves in this situation? Why do women choose these types of partners? Why do people get into addiction in the first place? And so I really just ignited this curiosity within me about human behavior. And the other thing I noticed is most people were really unhappy. Pretty much everyone I knew was unhappy for some reason. And I was like this happy little kid, even despite everything going on around me. And so I dove into personal development. I got my degree in psychology. I became a teacher. I taught 3rd grade for a few years because I really have a passion for helping children and doing my best to end the abuse cycle for as many people as I can, because abuse is perpetuated. It's passed down from generation to generation because they just think it's normal. They don't know any better. My mom was emotionally abusive because her family was emotionally abusive, and they don't even know, right? They think it's normal to call kids names and hit them and things like that. And so, yeah.
So Collette, that's a lot in 60 seconds.
Yeah.
So, even before we dive into formal about the topic, ladies and gentlemen, a bit of the background. So today's episode is on love and abuse. And you have actually encapsulated everything in a capsule, in 60 seconds. And you've made it a breeze, literally in a 60-second breeze. But, through the very few words that you spoke about, your mom was in an abusive relationship, and you actually moved 12 times in
6 times. 6 times
in 12 years.
Yeah.
That's crazy because moving itself takes 6 months or even a year. And I think you
not
can
for my mom.
Even before your bed becomes warm, you start to move again. So thank you for that very, very important snapshot of your life. which I think puts the backdrop of the topic today about hashtag abuse, hashtag trauma, hashtag love. And we do know that love can be abusive, knowingly or unknowingly, physically or non-physically. So the table and the floor is yours. So you can take it away and tell us more about the context of what you're going to say, and then you can move into your context.
Yeah, of course. So, as I said, my mission in my life is to end the abuse cycle for as many people as I can. And so, just witnessing, I think a lot of us can have grown up in these types of environments where it was just normal to witness people hitting each other or calling each other names or yelling or just getting violently angry and slamming doors. There's just not a lot of healthy communication happening.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm so passionate about what I do, is because I help people create those healthy relationships within themselves first, so that they're then able to go out and attract a partner based on this healthy, mature relationship. Because when we grow up and we're used to things, we attract what we're comfortable with. And so if we're comfortable with people fighting and yelling and screaming, we're going to attract people that fight and yell and scream because that's what we know. And so I've learned so much, and that's why I'm really excited about being here today, is just to share some of these things, like what things to do and things to look for when you're just before you even get into a relationship, so that you know, like, is this healthy and is this safe?
Yeah, and I would like you to make this more personal with myself and also with the listeners and the viewers, because you grew up in such a tumultuous family relationship dynamics when you were young. I think it must have gone into your psyche, right, when you were really, really young. Could you actually relate a couple of things that stood out when that actually kind of still has its impact on you in your psyche right now?
Yeah, of course. So my first stepfather, I was about 4 years old when my mom met him. And it's interesting because I try to tell myself, like, oh, it was such a long time ago, it doesn't really matter, it's not really affecting me. But and I've done so much work around it as well, but these things still stick with us in certain ways we don't even know about. And so my mom met this guy, and he was a coke dealer, and she was doing drugs, so it worked out. And I remember, like, she's like, oh, I'm getting married. And that's basically what would happen. My mom would meet a man, and she was so hungry for love. She just wanted to be loved. And she just wanted a dad for me, because she was only married to my dad for 6 months. Before, when she was pregnant, she got pregnant and then they broke up. So my parents were basically divorced before I was born. And
Hi, Colette. I think I lost you. Colette, are you there? Hello? Hello? Hello, I think I lost you, Colette. Hello? So we were at the point whereby you said your mom actually married a man because she wanted you to have a father, and because your father left her after 6 months when you were born. I mean, it must have been such a traumatic experience for a woman to have a baby, a child, and maybe she was going through, a depression herself.
oh yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. My mom had a lot happen to her as a teenager.
Yeah.
She was actually drugged by a friend, like her boyfriend that she trusted. She was in a
Wow.
mental hospital because of that. I mean, she just had a lot happen to her that was very traumatic. And so, yeah, she was very depressed in the first place. And then for my dad to leave and have a baby, like it was a lot for her. So she turned to drugs
Wow.
to cope with it. And so I think that's what happens with a lot of people. They have things happen to them that are just too painful in their past. My mom is so trusting. And that's the other thing, like she's so trusting. And so she doesn't think like anyone's gonna hurt her. And then she ends up with these men that take advantage of that trust. And so, yeah, and so she brought him home. And it's interesting because from the outside you can like tell, even as a child, you can tell like, okay, this guy is not really great, you know. And he was very scary. He was just like a very scary man, to me as a little girl, you know. And so I remember the first time um he was just sitting at his desk and he was like asking me to touch his penis. And I said no. And he's like, just touch it. Just touch it. And so I did. And so that was kind of like where it started, like the sexual abuse with him. And he was just very violent. He was the one that held the gun to us. I walked in the room out of nowhere because I'm just a little kid, right? So I just have these snippets of memories. I don't have a lot of memories of exactly like everything that happened. But I remember walking into the living room and him just like throwing me on my mom's lap and then pointing a gun at us. And I'm looking at this guy. I was more like mad than anything because I'm like, how dare this guy like point a gun at me? You know, I just like remember being very angry at this and just like looking at him in the eye, like, what are you doing? So luckily he didn't shoot us. I think he was just trying to scare us. He was very controlling. Um, and then his mothers had two teenage sons. And so they babysat me a few times. And so I was molested there as well. So it was in the family. And so that's why, you know, it's a cycle. You know, it's like passed on. And so I was also sexually abused by the mother's sons, which I guess would be his brothers.
But
I'm
at
not
what
really
age
sure.
were you then? What age
I was still
range?
like 4.
Oh, wow. I mean,
Yeah, I was
yeah,
very
Colette,
little.
that's a lot to take in. And you easily breezed it in like 30 seconds. I can't imagine that's almost a whole life, right? In that 30 second that you've just talked about. And because you said it with a smile, I, I can't. I think if the audience are looking at it and myself looking at you and the listeners are going to listen to this, that's a lot to pack in, and that's a lot to unpack as you grow up as an adult, right? Would you like to tell us?
Yeah, and so kids are so resilient,
Yeah,
you know, because they don't really know what's
yeah,
right and what's supposed to happen and what's
yeah,
not, but you kind of have a sense like this isn't
yeah,
okay. You
yeah,
know, this guy is like really scary.
yeah,
My mom ended up having to move like out of the city, like to a whole different city to get away from him. I ended up going to my dad's,
yeah,
like because my dad lives in Buffalo, New York.
yeah,
So I was taken away by Child Protective Services. And then I
yeah.
ended up going to my dad's, and then she was able to escape. And he even called me looking for my mom. And I was like smart enough to know, like, okay, well, if he doesn't know where she is, like, I'm not going to tell him, you know, even at that young age,
Wow.
at like 4 or 5 years old, knowing, like, yeah, I don't want him to know where she is if he doesn't
No,
know.
stop right there.
Um,
Stop right there, Colette. And also for the benefit of the audience and the listeners trying to follow through, tell us yourself as this young lady, how did you process this in your mind? Were you fearful? Were you trying to piece together the logic, or were you like being really analytical, or were you like just in a whole blur?
for me, it was more confusing than anything. Like, it was
Yeah,
just very confusing
yeah,
because I didn't know where my mom was a lot of the time,
yeah,
like, because she was sleeping, like, she'd
yeah,
be taking naps a lot.
yeah,
And so I didn't know where she was, and I didn't
yeah,
know why I was left alone with this guy.
yeah,
Um, And so there was fear,
Yeah.
like, I don't know what this guy is going to do.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, that was like most of the feelings, like confusion and fear
Yeah. At that
of
time,
like,
right? Yeah.
yeah, and anger, wanting to protect my mom.
Oh,
I
so
had
you
this
were trying to figure out, and instinctively you felt it wasn't right, and instinctively this guy had this energy that wasn't sitting right with you and your soul and your spirit. And also your mom must have exuded certain signs. How did she communicate these situations to you as a young child?
well, I couldn't tell her.
Oh,
So
she didn't know what was going on with you.
no.
Oh, wow. And you kept it for a long time.
Yeah, I didn't tell her until the
Yeah.
first time I told her I was like 11, and then she didn't believe me at first.
Yep. That happens. That
Yeah.
happens. Yeah.
So she didn't actually believe me. Like she didn't want to believe it, I think is really what it was. Like she didn't
Yeah.
want to believe that something so bad and horrible would have happened. And so it wasn't until I was in my 20s that we really talked about it. And
Yeah.
she felt like so bad and guilty about the
Yes.
whole thing.
Oh, wow. And let's unwind this because I think there's so much to learn for women, for girls, for what you've gone through, particularly at the age of 11. And that's that turning point, right? You've decided to tell. And because you've kept for some time, tell us the keeping secret part, okay? What on in your mind when you're so young, you're growing, these flashbacks come to you, and also at the point of you deciding to tell, and then being told that you were not believed. I mean, this is just, to me, this is like, it's almost the world can collapse. Tell us these three phases.
Yeah. So the secret part was because he told me that if I told anyone, he would hurt my mom.
Oh my
And
God.
so,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I
Yes.
didn't want him to hurt my mom. So I just didn't tell anyone. And plus, I didn't want to get taken away. I thought like if I told someone, then they would take me away from my mom, and I wanted to protect her. And so I didn't want to get
Wow.
taken away from her. I
All the
had like this
lies, right?
responsibility. I'm sorry.
It's all the lies.
Yeah.
Oh my God, my heart goes
Yeah.
out to you, Collette. So you were being put under a lot of duress. You were being put under a lot of stress because you're thinking that you got to hold on because you got to protect your mom. And you being in this young mind, how did it affect you?
Yeah, and it affected me for a very like my whole life basically
Wow.
because it's like this hyper responsibility that everything was somehow my fault, and that's how my mom
Yes.
made me feel even outside of the abuse, like without even knowing the abuse, like everything was blamed on me. Like if like it's little things, it's like if she missed a red light, it was my fault. If she was late, it was my fault. And so I was already like given
Yeah.
this hyper responsibility for everything that happened. And then on
Mm.
top of it, like with the sexual abuse, like I wasn't going to tell her,
Yeah.
because then
Yeah. Yeah.
like yeah, so I was already made to feel responsible. And even like my grandpa would be like, be nice to your mom. Like she's going through a lot. She's really stressed. Like
Because they don't
take care of
know.
her.
They don't know. Oh my God. So I think it's a lot to take in, especially learning from yourself as a case study. You were really young. You self-blamed yourself. And then the point whereby you told her, what made you decide to tell her, number one? And then when you told her and she was in disbelief, what went on in your mind? Could you describe?
So I think I decided to tell her because somehow he came up. We didn't talk about him a lot, like after she left him.
Yeah,
We didn't really talk about him much, but somehow I think it came up and I
yeah,
was mad. Like I was already angry at her.
yeah,
And so I was like, yeah, this happened. And
yeah.
she was like, no, it didn't, you liar. Like she cursed at me a lot. So
Oh my
there's
God.
curse words in there. But yeah, and it like devastated me. I think that hurt me more because I had like such a sense of I'm not going to tell anyone because I want to protect her. And even with like my next stepfather, he was also abusive, and I wanted to protect her and like referee and stuff like that. And so for her to like not believe me, even like because I felt that I was keep not telling her to protect her,
Yeah.
and for her to be like, oh, you're a liar, like I think that hurt me
Wow.
more than like anything else.
And you know, Colette, so there are these different markers in your life. From 4 years old, you were being abused, right? And then you grew with it because you were given heaps and heaps of lies, right? And then you went through this kind of duress, the kind of threat, right? It's a kind of threat to say, if you tell someone this is going to happen, it is a threat. And you have been living in that kind of lies and threat. And you kind of like went through this not knowing what they are because you were so young. You can't put a finger to say this is a threat in my life, this is a pressure, da 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 da. But as you look back, then you start to think like, okay, I need to like really look at it. And then you decide to tell someone at the age of 11, and then you were disbelieved. Now, and after 11 years old, I think we're really interested. How did you make sense out of all this? And as a young woman that is growing up with all these in your life, um, how did you learn to be normal again?
For me, it was more of like a perfectionism. I don't know if I'm normal. But yeah, for me, it turned into like this hyper perfectionism. Like
Yeah,
I wanted to make it look like life was really good and everything was
yeah,
great and everything was perfect. And so it's like that lie just like
yeah,
perpetuates, right? Because I wanted to make my mom look good and make my
yeah,
mom look like she was doing a great job. And
yeah.
so, yeah, so I made sure I got really good grades. I made sure that I looked like a really good student. I never got in trouble. I never did anything like that would get me in trouble. I mean,
Yeah.
besides talking, I talked all the time. So that was the only thing I got in trouble for was I was always talking and to people in class. So I had
Okay,
to always sit at my own table.
tell me that symptom. I mean, someone keeps talking, which you brought it out. It's actually symptomatic of something people trying to cover up, right? Do you feel so? Because you were trying to cover up the pain, you're trying to cover up the history, it's something like you tried so hard to have all these activities outside on the facade so that no one can dive in. Am I right to say that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
at,
exactly. It was very lonely.
wow. Tell us how did you start to, and you did say about at the age of 20, you revisit this with your mother again, right? And she started to believe you. Tell us that scenario whereby you set her down.
Yeah, so I started meditating and I started meditating with this program called Holosync.
Yeah,
And so what it is, it's like a meditation music, but it's
yeah.
designed to stir up trauma. Like that's what it does, is it
Mm,
repatterns your brain if you have past trauma. And so I started using it and I didn't really think much of it. I was just like listening to it every day.
yeah.
And all of a sudden this like wave of anger came
Mm.
up, like
Towards
just
her,
so mad and
towards her.
so upset. And
Yeah,
so I went to my mom and I
yeah.
was just like yelling at her because I was
Wow.
just so mad.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I cannot believe that you let like that this happened. I can't believe you married someone and left
Mm.
me alone. Like, who leaves a child
Wow.
alone with a 4-year old that they don't know? Like, it was just basically all of the emotions that I had been like kind of not letting come up kind of just
Yeah.
like exploded. And I
Yes.
almost like feel bad because I was like, and she like just sat there and listened because I was so angry. I think she like finally realized like I wasn't lying. Like, and I was yelling about, I'm like, I can't believe you wouldn't believe me. Like, why would I lie about this? You know,
Yeah.
there's no reason for me to make this up.
Yeah.
And just like really got mad and like just released all the stuff that was there. And she was like actually very gracious about it, like all things considered. Consider I was yelling, you know, I was like really emotional. And so she just listened and then she was like, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. Like I would never have let that happen if I knew about it. I try to keep you away from him. I try to like keep you at grandma and grandpa's. And so she was like very apologetic about it. And then like she still feels guilty about it. She'll bring it up sometimes. Like I'm 42 now. And she'll still kind of bring it up once in a while. Like, I'm so sorry. I didn't want that to happen. Like, and I'm like, well, there's nothing you can do about it now, you know? There's no reason to beat yourself up over it forever. But like, you know, because she was only 22 when she had me. So she was about 26 when this happened.
Okay. I mean, there's so much to share on so many different levels about your mom, then about you. Let's talk about you as an adult now and you having your child already, who is almost like 4. You have a child now, 4 years old?
Nope, I don't have any kids.
Oh, you don't have a kid, but you got, oh yeah, you just got married, I think, right?
Yeah, I've been married for 4 years. Yep.
Yeah. Now you are a grown woman and you are much older than your mom when she had you, and when all these whirlwind went around, and like if you were to look at her now, how do you see, or do you see that there is phases of life or personality, kind of different phases that she actually went through also, her being in an abusive relationship when she was a young woman, then she had you, and then she went in and out of relationships, and then after that, when you start telling her about this when you were in your 20s, and then she was in her 40s, I guess, at that time, and then now as she is, there's this phase that she has gone through. How would you like learn your observations about her, and how would you describe the phases that she's gone through?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing because I've known her my whole life, right?
Yeah.
And so I've been able to see like the changes between how like she raised me versus my two sisters,
Yeah.
because I have two sisters and we're all 8 years apart.
Yeah.
And so it's just interesting to see that. And she's been single for 18 years. So she kind of learned finally after the last one, like, hey, or actually she's been single for like 20 years now. Gosh. She's been single for a very long time because she finally just kind of gave up, I think. She's like, wow, I'm just really attracting the wrong people. I tried 3 times to meet, to find love and to find someone who's going to treat me well. And I obviously don't like have the right tools to pick someone healthy. And so I'm just going to stay single. So yeah, she's been single for a very long time. She's doing well. She hasn't done drugs in a very long time, probably 20 years as well. So yeah.
What about yourself? What about yourself?
Yeah, so for me, it's interesting because like from such a young age, I had to like feel, hide basically who I really was. And so there's a lot of loneliness that comes from this, and this like wall that I put up to keep people from really knowing me for such a long time. And it's only maybe the last like 8 years, like maybe like 34. So 34 years before I felt that I could really show what was happening inside of me, how I really felt about things, how yeah, and except for like my very, very inner circle, like maybe like 1 or 2 close friends that I would have, but that's it. Like I didn't trust anyone else. So it was very hard for me to trust people. It was very hard for me to be like to communicate what was really like happening for me. All of that took like practice.
Okay, and
to be able to do all of those things.
And to continue where you just talked about, so hard for you to trust someone. So how do you actually do that with your current relationship?
Yeah, so with my current relationship, it's been really nice because I was practicing before him. I was practicing going to like women's circles and going to spaces where I could feel safe to share what was there for me, share how I was feeling, and even the coaching program.
You are undoing and unpacking a lot of things. So when you present yourself into a new relationship, you're kind of like you're kind of like a clean person. You didn't bring the baggages, am I right?
I mean, I brought a little bit, but yeah, for like, I unpacked a lot of it. So I had to even, for me to even get to a place to be able to get married,
Yeah.
that's a lot of trust, right? To be able
Yes.
to marry someone,
Yeah.
when like, yeah, when
Yes.
you've seen like such
Yeah.
unhealthy
Yeah.
marriages. So for me to even get to the point where I
Yeah.
could even get married took a
Yeah.
lot of internal work for me,
Yeah.
of being comfortable with men,
Yes.
you know, and a lot of distrust for men, like men changing, and you know,
Yeah.
you think they're a certain way and then they end up being completely different.
Yeah.
So learning how to trust myself in my
Yeah.
choices, learning
Yeah.
about healthy relationships, what red flags
Yeah.
look like, what, you know, what it looks like to communicate in a way where there's no screaming and yelling. Like, I mean, I did the work, right? And that's why
Yes.
I coach people, because I had to do so much work as far as like
Yes.
learning and reading and taking courses and practicing. And so that's why I coach now, because I know like what it took for me to be able to get to where I am today. And
Yeah.
then once you're in a relationship, like a whole new set of stuff comes up, right? Because now you live with somebody, and so like you get to put into practice all of that
Yeah.
stuff that you're learning about communication and trust and all of that. And so I've been in actually like a trauma coaching program the last year
Yeah.
and a half.
Yeah.
And so that's really actually helped me a lot too, with even unpacking even more and feeling safe and all of those things in relationship with other people in general, not just my husband.
Yeah. And for you to say that, I mean, that is very deep. You must have gone through a lot of unpacking, and I mean really, really unpacking, and then, unraveling. So you have aptly said that it's a lot of work that you have done, a lot of, I should say, a lot of training you've done, a lot of sessions, a lot of um, rehabilitating your soul, and then to be
Yes.
able to trust someone and invite someone into your life again. In the next couple of minutes before we sign off, because I almost have you for 40 minutes, which I promised, tell us, in a capsule, what are these therapies? And for some of the listeners and audience, what can they do?
Yeah. So the main thing is to start to build trust again with yourself.
Yeah,
So making sure first and foremost that you're
yeah,
listening to yourself, giving
yeah,
yourself those spaces,
yeah,
journaling, meditation, yoga,
yeah,
anything that really allows you to sit with yourself and be comfortable within. And
yeah,
then slowly, for me, it was slowly, it doesn't have to be slowly for you, but going to safe places, like safe circles, like women's circles,
yeah.
um, therapy places where, like the inner coaching academy that I'm a
Inner
part of
coaching.
is, yeah, inner coaching academy is a place where you can go, and we do containers of like with people, small groups,
Yeah.
where we teach trust, we teach communication, we teach like how to give feedback, we teach how to acknowledge. That was another
Yeah.
thing that I had a
Yeah.
problem with, is like acknowledging people. I love acknowledging people, but it was so
Wow.
uncomfortable because I didn't think it would be received. So that's another thing we
Wow.
practice, is acknowledging people for what they do. And so, yeah, finding these
Huge.
spaces like that where it's safe to be, like really be and be seen and heard and felt authentically, is really important.
And Colette, I think you must have been, I think you must have gone through these markers in your life, right? Each time you kind of like bounce back up, bounce, and then you leap higher and you leap higher, and you grow. And I can see your face, you're glowing, and I can feel your soul. You're open, you're honest, and you're able to share this openly, which I really would like to show my gratitude to you. I think there's a lot that we can actually take in, and definitely I hope to invite you again to dive more into it as a professional if you can. I think there's a lot of learning we can do from your life story, Colette.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, because I like the part whereby you said, you needing to learn again how to trust someone, how to love someone, coming to a space of safety. I think I think people struggle with that a lot of times when they have like a traumatic experience, like what you say, the inner soul, the inner human uh, mental thing. But I think a lot of people do not recognize there is a wall in the first place. You know what I'm trying to say? And they live their
Oh,
lives that way. You know what I'm trying to say?
oh, of course. Yeah, a lot of defense mechanisms. Like people develop a lot of defense mechanisms to keep themselves
Oh,
safe,
defense
right?
mechanism.
And so one of
So
them
that's a
is like
pro.
avoiding people. What?
So that's a pro. You are the pro.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Uh,
they don't really know. They just know that things aren't working, right?
yeah,
Things aren't working the
sure.
way that they want them to. They don't have the closeness in the relationship that they know is possible, or they're not moving forward with their goals.
Yeah.
That's usually the symptoms, but they don't know
Symptoms.
why, right?
Okay.
The stuff happened to me. I have these symptoms, and I can't change it. It's not changing, and I don't know
Okay.
why.
Two questions before I say thank you to you. Number one, did it were you ever in the situation whereby um, you felt like you became the hater? Okay, number one, you became the person that become bitter. You became the person that um, uh, someone who felt that, yeah, you had so much things. Did you ever become these two at any point? The bitter
So as a
person and the hater?
teenager,
Yeah.
yeah, as a teenager, like, or most of my young adult life, I didn't have any close friends. Like I had one friend, and then I just thought
Yeah.
everyone else sucked.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Okay.
I hate people,
Okay. You
right?
know
Like
why?
people suck, and I hate
Yes,
them.
you know why I want that? Because I hope that I can invite you to part two. Because I think there's a lot of people would love to learn from you, how you walked out of that hate. I mean, you do see a lot of people with that, and they never came to terms about recognizing that they are the hater or that we are the hater. We don't even know that we are, and we don't even know that we have the bitterness, the clenched fist. I think you could point to us maybe some of these symptoms, like what you say. These are some of the symptoms that tell you that you are in this spot. You got to get out in order to live a full, soulful life, to speak. Having that said, and the second question is, um, you are a professional because not only you're learning in theory, because you went through it. Tell me, that process, is it difficult to come out of? In
Like I
short.
said, it took years. I mean, I was a
Oh, it took
psychology
years.
major,
Yeah.
and that was what, like 10, 20 years ago. It's been 20
Yeah.
years.
So you took
But
like
even before
years.
that, I was reading personal development books. Um, so yeah, I've definitely put in the work to understand all of it, and to see myself, and to free myself. And
Yes, the
yeah, it's
bondage.
definitely been a process.
I mean, these are like bondage, right? It kind of
Yeah.
holds you back. It kind of like shackles. So I want to ask Collette, final question. It took you so many years to unravel. A lot of people don't even start the journey of unraveling, and they don't even know that they are in that space. And I can tell you with my fingers, I can recognize these people. And maybe I'm one of them. Okay. So Colette, thank you to you. Is there any final conclusion for the next 15 seconds that you would like to share with the listeners and the viewers?
Yeah. If you're feeling stuck, if this story like brought stuff up for you,
Yeah.
don't feel like you have to handle it alone. Because that's one thing, like feeling like I have to do everything myself is one
Yeah.
of those defense mechanisms. Like you don't have to
I
do
see.
everything yourself. Reach
Okay.
out. there's lots, like for me, you can reach out to me, of course, but
Yeah.
just to somebody, don't feel like you have to hold this stuff inside alone.
Okay. And do you do your counseling sessions over Zoom virtually also?
Yeah, my coaching is online.
Okay, great, great. That means you can reach the international audience for coaching, right? I see that
Yep.
you've got a huge market for you.
Thank you. Yeah.
The world is at your fingertips.
Yeah, you gotta love the internet, right? It just opens everything
yeah,
up.
the world is just at the Zoom. So, Collette, I just want to thank you for spending the last 50 minutes, which is your life. And to give it justice, I hope that I could invite you again, so that you can tell more about these instruments of therapies. Definitely, they do need to come back to you on a one-to-one basis, I'm very sure. But you let people recognize that they're in that space. They need to first recognize that they need help. And they need to first recognize that, hey, I think I'm a hater. I think being a
Yeah.
hater is not a good space to be. Some people think that being aggressive is powerful. Being able to hate on someone is powerful, but it could be just the other way because they're just trying to protect themselves. And people aren't willing to let their vulnerabilities out, just in case that they feel they be put in that same weak situation again. Am I right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what it is. It's a defense mechanism that our brains do to help us, to
Yeah.
keep us safe. And I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah.
So
So, Collette, I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with us internationally, wherever we are. This channel goes worldwide, and the audio through my podcast goes worldwide, and it's going to be played on radio also. So, Collette, thank you so much, and I'd love to invite you again. It's fascinating to hear your life story, and watching you now is like beautiful self, but also your energy glows, and also you're exuding this positivism and this, yes, there is hope out there for you guys. Thank you so much, Collette.
yes, thank you. It was so fun. Thank you for letting me share my stories.
Yes, and I'll see you on Facebook where we meet again, and then I'll let you know when the links are out. Thank you, and I'm going to meet your friend Vince tomorrow, and then we can come back to have a three-person panel after that. Yay!
I would love that. Yay. Yeah, Vince is awesome. You guys are in for a treat.
Thank you. Bye. Talk to you
Bye.
soon. Bye.